We have so far covered asset, rotation and scale variation. And the last thing I want to look at is color. So let's set up a scatter on a grid using an instance node set to fast point instancing like we mentioned before. So this is a pine tree that I made before, so I'm just checking the shop material path on the pines and on the bark. So this is the path that I need to set up to make sure that this alembic reads in the materials properly. So this is probably fine. Switch this up to be a scatter. That's fine. Okay, let me just hit render. See what we get. Okay, so we've got a nice little forest of pine trees here, and what we want to do is add some color variation. So Houdini being Houdini, there's a good few ways to do this, to add this color variation. Arnold does have a built-in color jitter that we could take advantage of, which does work great, although it does cause some issues if we want to remove some of these points based on camera clipping. Anyway, drop down a color jitter. Just cancel this for now. We will leave the data and the procedural tabs here and just focus on the object and face tabs. Let me just plug this into the base color. And I'll also plug this into the subsurface color. Nice. So on the input here is where I would choose the color I would like. Let me just match roughly what we had before. This is fine, we can always tweak it. Okay, so there are loads of variations that you can use here. I'll grab the per object tab. We have gain, hue, and saturation. Now, I wouldn't generally do it per face, or if I was, I would keep it very subtle. You don't want to introduce too much noise, and anyway, there are better ways to do this. But let's just add some, here per object. we just want to keep the hue pretty low. Okay, and let's hit render here. So you can see that this gives us a very quick way to vary some colour throughout the scatter. But let's instead use VOPs just to more easily control this and obviously create some custom colour variation. So jump into the instance node and drop down an attribute VOP. Okay, now I want to just increase these points just for now so I can read what's going on in the VOP. So drop down a noise, an AA noise, and a ramp. Now we want to plug the P in here, plug this into the ramp, and plug this in to the colour. Now all of these colour changes here are actually controlled on the top level. So to make this easier, let me just copy this and paste the relative reference here, just so we don't have to come back out to change the colour. Let's just change the frequency. Keep it quite big. And let's just check what we have in the geometry spreadsheet. So the colours are quite low. We can ramp up the amplitude to fix this. That's better. And now we can use this ramp to introduce some colour shifts. Let me just offset this a bit, just so it's a bit more obvious. And let's say we want everything here to be dark green. And we'll make it quite obvious. Let's make everything here a yellow. Nice. Let's just render this. Remember to reduce the points again. And the final thing we need to do is bring this in to the shader. User RGB. At the moment it's set to color, but let's just export this and call it color vary or something. Make sure it's a vector. And paste it here. Okay, now I can hit render. So what we are doing here is we are creating those groupings that we mentioned in week 1. Now if we want to ramp this up a bit, we can clamp this. Or even make the colour more obvious. I will of course need to re-render this so we can see. Cool. So this does the general color variation in these big patches, but what if we wanted to add some random color variation to this? Well, we would just use the point number that we used before, this guy here. We'll drop down our randomize. We can just steal this, but we have to rename it. And do the same, copy it to the top level. And I'll use a color mix just to blend these together. Okay, hit render again. So now we get some subtle color variation within these guys, but also we have this global color variation here. Now we could have done this using the color jitter, and we could have mixed them both within the shader. We could have just mixed this color jitter with this data here. And that's what I meant when I said there's 100 ways to do this within Houdini. So that generally covers all the variation we need. We have the object variation, we have the rotation, translation and scale variation, and now we have the color variation. And this is all you need to create some really rich environments. So next we'll take a look at texturing and shading the landscape.